Imagine you're an environmentalist fresh out of school and you've just landed your first opportunity in the corporate world. You're excited and eager to take on the challenges ahead of you. The only problem is, instead of saving the world and finding new ways to make a difference, you're looking at spreadsheets for hours. Welcome to the world of greenhouse gas accounting, or at least the old world. On this episode of IT Visionaries, we brought in two industry leaders who are making a difference in that world. Ari Alexander is the GM of Salesforce Sustainability Cloud, and Shengyuan Su is a program manager for sustainability at Salesforce. They joined the show to discuss how Salesforce's Sustainability Cloud is changing the way environmentalists report emissions, why companies voluntarily report their carbon emissions, and how the private sector is being asked to lead the change for governments around the world. Enjoy this episode. This episode of IT Visionaries is part of a special series on sustainability. IT Visionaries is brought to you by the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Take climate action with a pre-built carbon accounting solution and gain insights into your greenhouse gas emissions. Learn more at salesforce.com/solutions/sustainability.
Welcome to another episode of IT Visionaries. I'm Ian Faison, host of IT Visionaries, and we have two special guests. We got a roundtable action, digital roundtable coming at you. Ari, how's it going?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you, Ian?
Doing great amid all of the craziness. Hope everybody is staying safe and shelter in place wherever you're listening. Sue, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Ian? Nice to meet you virtual today, and feel pleasure to join this call today, and especially during this special timing, and hopefully everyone is safe and healthy.
We are super excited to talk about all things Sustainability Cloud at Salesforce today. It's, more than ever, it is a perfect topic for the current kind of day and age here. So before we get into that, I want to ask first, how did both of you get into technology? So Ari, how about you?
Well, I actually got into technology when I was working in the federal government. Believe it or not, I saw a huge need to trace where federal dollars got spent out. And I found it was very difficult to get my arms around that information, and found Salesforce as an opportunity to help tell that story inside a U.S. government agency. And that's what led me to the next chapter of my career.
And Sue, what about you?
Yeah, I am just a fan of technology and data in general. I love doing mathematical, work when I was in school, and constantly solve problems using data. And prior to Salesforce, I led business analytics and reporting in a renewable energy finance company. And I applied technologies like big data, database management, etc., to optimize renewable energy generation financing structures. And those experiences made me realize that technologies could provide huge values for both environment and sustainability and business. It should play a key role of accelerating climate action. So I got super jazzed and excited about this new role opening Salesforce, and I'm just super excited about Salesforce technology, and also the potential that I could combine my skills of environmental science and my passion on technology in this role.
So for those of our listeners who don't know, what is Sustainability Cloud?
Okay, cool. So Sustainability Cloud is Salesforce's solution to help all of our customers understand their carbon footprint and drive their climate action. So it's a pre-built solution on our platform designed specifically for that purpose for all of our customers.
Great. And so what types of folks are using this? Like, what kind of companies are trying to kind of figure out and solve this problem?
Well, there are many thousands of companies in the world today that report voluntarily on their greenhouse gas emissions. Most of those folks do that in spreadsheets, and this is a process that's quite complex. Sue knows this personally, having done this on behalf of Salesforce for many years. And so we're really targeting the product at people like Sue inside companies all over the world.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add that it's not only companies, right? You could imagine every entity, like government or every organization, have some sort of environmental impact. My vision on this initially was that every business or organization could measure their environmental impact using this technology and this solution.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about how much is still done just like in spreadsheets that's not, ready for the cloud, that people can't take, as many actionable insights and things like that. Do you have any, I don't know if you have any data on this or estimates, but like how many people are still kind of using spreadsheets to track something that's, obviously extremely important?
Yeah, the vast majority, even of the Fortune 1000 companies in the world, are using spreadsheets to do their annual greenhouse gas inventory. And it really is remarkable because this is a time when that data that comes out of those processes has greater and greater visibility than ever before, right up to the C-suite, the board of advisors, the board of directors, the employees, all of the stakeholders that a company is managing. And you're absolutely right. It's crazy for a data set like that, which really impacts investment decisions, impacts employee perspectives, customer perceptions of companies, to be really in this pre-internet era of technology. It's quite shocking. And that's actually one of the reasons we decided to bring this product to the market, because we felt like it was high time for investor grade data at scale for this environmental data.
And to take a step back, like kind of what is the scope of the problem? I think, a lot of times we see sustainability and it's almost like a loaded word, right? It's like there's so many things that go into building sustainable companies, to have this kind of impact. Like, what is kind of the scope of the problem that folks have right now?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that sustainability is one of those words that can mean so many different things to so many different people. The Sustainable Development Goals framework out of the United Nations itself is a very large number of different, though related, sustainability goals. Our product is really focused on climate action and the adjacent sustainable development goals that relate to the environment, whether it's life on water, life on land, infrastructure, renewable energy, et cetera. But it's really focused on climate action. There are many people that when they hear sustainability, they think either about more of the social dimension or even the governance dimension when people talk about ESG or environmental social governance reporting. Sustainability Cloud's really focused on the climate change, climate action part of that conversation.
Yeah, and one of the things that you all have shared publicly is kind of this idea of speeding carbon accounting from 6 months to 6 weeks, that sort of a thing. I mean, you just think of like the amount of time that it takes to create proper reporting and know what you have, just like you would do with any other business process. It seems like just closing that gap is a massive need and requirement to say, like, to figure out just like where are we at, like hit the tear button and say like, where are we at as a society on this thing that clearly we all need to be, paying attention to.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of companies are facing same challenges, right? Usually the problems were, we got a lot of unstructured data sets from multiple data sources, including some, multiple emails with stakeholders, PDF files, invoices, or some random spreadsheets. So those are all time-consuming pieces for users or sustainability professionals like me to consume and compile the information into something tangible and structured and organized to report out. And also there's no like streamlined processes or repeatable approaches to do it. So a lot of companies are still in the journey of figuring things out and build their own structured processes or plans to manage those information. So definitely when I was building out the solution or the first prototype of the solution, I was actively thinking about and what are those pain points that we need to address. and what are the values that Salesforce technology or any technology could provide to be able to make this process more trusted and more streamlined and more efficient. And definitely those thinking process actually inspired me a lot on a lot of functions that we built to help shorten our timeline and improve the data quality. For example, we built some pretty great estimation, or we call extrapolation functions in the cloud. And so basically, if some companies or business can't get data in any way, then we provide some really robust methodologies for them to use and estimate their impact so that they can quickly get an insight on how big their environmental impact is and then be able to take actions immediately. Also, other great functions that we build to solve this problem are, we build some dashboards, interactive dashboards to be able to aggregate those data points and provide insights on where companies or business could focus on to address their environmental issues. Also, for our auditors, so prior to Sustainability Cloud, I have to send them, a zip file, including a lot of spreadsheets to provide those data to our verified third-party auditors and to be able to complete our audit project and disclose our environmental metrics in 10K financial filing. With Sustainability Cloud, what I did is just simply provide them a login, right? Provide them some credentials so that they can just log into our cloud and do whatever they need to verify our data and ask questions. So it's pretty interactive and really improved our process and increased the efficiency.
So our audience of CIOs, CTOs, technology leaders are often looked to as, the subject matter expert on all things technology. The person who, as them in finance, everybody is coming to them to say, hey, can I buy this? In most cases, not all, but in most. I'm curious, like from the business side, from the business unit perspective, and how that blends into technology, like where does the importance of having something like Sustainability Cloud matter? Because you talked about some of the, regulations and things that you want to make sure that you can do. Obviously, Sue, you drink your own tea here in the fact that you use it for Salesforce, and also you use the product and you talk about it. So I'm just curious, like from a technology standpoint, as the technology leaders are looking at things like this to help inform their company, like what are those conversations like?
Yeah, it's really interesting. For a long time, sustainability was in a silo at a company, even when a company was a relative leader in their industry in sustainability. And what's happened in recent times, really in the last year or two, is sustainability has become a central strategic conversation at many, many companies across every industry. What that means is that we're often having conversations with CFOs, CIOs, CMOs that are interested in sustainability, what they should know, what this tool does, what it will enable for them. So for a CIO in particular, Salesforce has worked for about 20 years to build relationships with CIOs, with IT directors to really become partners in technology for all the transformative needs companies have had, whether it's around the move to social or mobile or AI. And now sustainability is becoming one of those macro trends that CIOs are trying to get their arms around. And Sustainability Cloud is a wonderful way for them to begin that journey as a partner to their sustainability team and to the overall conversation on environmental data taking place at the company.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think that, if you had asked CIOs 20 years ago, what their role in the organization was, I would imagine that sustainability might have been last on the list. You know what I mean? Like in terms of all of the things that they have to deal with. And technology obviously shapes, everything in business now. And the power that someone like the IT leader has is just completely different than it ever has been. And like you said, this is something that is at the cutting edge of what every company is thinking about. Like, how do we become carbon neutral? How do we, as whether it's building new buildings with, LEED certifications, all sorts of things like that, or, supply chain and logistics, with the philanthropy side of things, and how they give back and do those. I mean, like, there's just so much that sustainability is at the forefront. Obviously, climate change being an issue, at the forefront as well. So it's something that I think IT probably never thought they had to deal with, and kind of now they do. So what would be kind of the advice or, best practices that you've seen from that perspective?
Yeah, what's particularly interesting right now is that the vast majority of the people that we're talking to about Sustainability Cloud around the world, at all of our customers, at potential new customers, those folks are actually new to Salesforce. In other words, the people in Su's role at most companies are not Salesforce users. Sustainability leaders, sustainability analysts, and Salesforce users have a very thin overlap in the Venn diagram.
Yeah.
And what that means is that IT champions, that IT partners that have worked with Salesforce on many projects very far from sustainability become critical middlemen and women in the conversation between Salesforce and sustainability teams about driving climate action using technology. And that's a fascinating place for them to be because they have a tremendous amount of expertise, deep relationships in many cases in the technology world with Salesforce employees, with our partner ecosystem. And then they're fellow employees and colleagues of sustainability professionals who may not have always had, the budget or the invitation to begin thinking about sustainability from an IT project management perspective. And so we're finding that really interesting dots are getting connected within companies driven by Sustainability Cloud because of this evolving strategy that really brings in folks from procurement, from travel, from IT, from sustainability, often with a C-level executive sponsor to think about how to do this at a company.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think Sustainability Cloud leverages the core competency of Salesforce technology, and it solves a lot of problems in environmental and sustainability world, and just like how Salesforce technology is meant to solve those business problems for our customers. So we're encouraging and recommending other companies, especially tech companies, to think about what are their core competency and how their technology could provide a lot of values for climate and for environment as well.
I would also imagine that there's just tons of data that is not being leveraged in this entire transaction. Like if you're talking about the fact that, sustainability folks who probably have not been trained extensively on technology and are using stuff like spreadsheets, that the amount of data that's being cross-shared, in terms of like best practices and just like, being able to throw something like machine learning or anything like that at the problem, that if you don't have good data management around your sustainability information, then you're not really going to be able to take a lot of insights from that.
Yeah, we found that a lot of sustainability teams have been outsourcing this problem for just that reason. It's easier to pay a consultant to ballpark your environmental impact than it sometimes is to get your own systems to align and give you a complete view, given the complex data silos that so many companies live in. And that's the day-to-day of conversations between our customers and us at Salesforce. And we're now just applying that and focusing the particulars of that on how it relates to the data relevant for a company to do its carbon inventory.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I think part of this too, there's an organizational change management piece to this, which is true with every type of technology adoption. If you're working with a group of people that historically are not using, some sort of SaaS or, cloud technology, there's probably some resistance to change. Sue, I'm curious, like, what do your peers say about this? Like, are there people on the fence? Are there people that are like, this is the stupidest thing ever? Why do we need to, do this sort of thing? Or is it kind of like, hey, wow, we finally have some, data behind what we've been talking about?
Yeah, I think it totally depends on where the businesses or companies are in terms of their sustainability journey, right? As Ari previously mentioned, some companies just don't have enough budget or they have super limited budget for sustainability. So it makes sense for them to outsource or, tackle this problem super quickly using Excel spreadsheet. But some climate leaders like Salesforce, we think about reporting and think about transparency in a really strategic way. And thus, using Sustainability Cloud and those advanced technologies definitely help us make our programs more mature and robust. And I found very interesting, in my peers that some companies actually switched to some technologies or software at the end, or eventually they switched back again to Excel file. Just because they wanted to do some quick calculation and they don't really see the value of some of the existing technologies in the market. So I think it's still in the early stage for companies to adopt those technologies. And as you know, currently environmental reporting and disclosure is still like companies should be volunteering to do those reporting. And it's not a mandate. But as regulation and standards become more and more strict, and with the climate change keeps evolving and keeps becoming more and more serious, and I think the market or the peer companies may have different attitude or different position on this.
Switching gears to the government side of things, we're talking a lot about kind of the business side, but the implications for government is obviously a necessity, and our government can at times be a little tentative to use technology to solve problems, but it's pretty clear that the same level of adoption challenges might be present. I'm curious, how does this all apply to governments? What are governments thinking about? And I know that companies like Salesforce and BlackRock and others are participating in, things like, Davos and all sorts of things, summits to try to figure out how we can do a better job at this and help governments. But I'm curious, what does this look like in application to government?
Yeah, I mean, I had the chance to represent Salesforce at COP25, the recent climate change conference in Madrid. And, there were a lot of things about the experience that were incredibly inspiring and fascinating. But one of the things that most shocked me was the degree to which the governments looked back at us and said, the private sector needs to lead on this. And I kind of came into the event thinking, we've got some tools that we're here to assist the governments with so that they can have more transparency and more efficiency in their own carbon accounting, because what scale matters more than each of the national governments. But for a variety of reasons, they actually find more hope in the private sector moving along faster in the collective carbon accounting of the major companies in the private sector. And so I just start there because it was sort of a humbling and surprising takeaway for me from the conference in Madrid. One kind of specific point related to the Paris Accord is that, in fact, countries aren't required even on an annual basis to report on their carbon emissions. There's something called the global stock take that's still a couple of years away, whereas many thousands of companies, including just about all the Fortune 1000, are annually reporting on our carbon footprints. And so, in a sense, there's relatively more maturity to this process in the private sector. Now, what does that mean for what the applicability or the support could look like? Well, we're actually in conversations with governments to identify what would be most helpful to them for us to be able to further evolve and adapt the tools in Sustainability Cloud for their use cases. They're not tremendously different processes from a workflow and data model standpoint, but we want to be sure that as we build out in that direction, it's really going to meet the needs of national governments. As Sue mentioned previously, at the more local level, kind of cities and smaller government jurisdictions, they may see, Sustainability Cloud as it exists today as a good fit for them, because in many ways, as large, real estate holders in major metropolitan areas, their carbon footprint process would look very much like a major company in a city. And they might see that use case as very similar to them as they roll up to kind of state and national records.
That's wild. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. That business, you just have more flexibility in terms of like the leadership team and the board making a decision on it is a lot easier than, going through the political channels. So it makes sense, but it's wild that government leaders are like, hey, we need to look to, to companies to be able to do that. I think, and it kind of reminds me of, we did a podcast called Futurist Cities where we were looking at like how, cities will change and building codes and all sorts of stuff like that. And how when, a bunch of technology companies in the Bay Area, not specifically always here, but just, a bunch of the buildings that were made here, like Salesforce Tower or, Slack's new building or things like that, that it's a choice what kind of sustainability rating you want, right? Like it's the builder's choice to choose those things. And so if the leadership team of your company says like, oh, we're just going to do it this way, like that's what you're going to do, So, I mean, again, it makes sense, but it is a little crazy that, that government leaders, need to look to enterprise to figure that out.
One other lesson that I drew from the experience talking to governments about this from Salesforce's perspective that I found really interesting was that the transparency momentum that we're seeing in the private sector, where companies are really being pushed by investors to shine more light on this data, that same kind of transparency is extraordinarily fraught on the world stage of international climate diplomacy. So it would seem like what matters more than every citizen of every country knowing, which countries have done their accounting, to what extent they're on track with targets or even more ambitious targets, have a stack rank, if you will. But the reality is for the international organizations designated with the task of bringing every country in the world together to continue the process of climate negotiations, they actually find it extremely difficult to try to shine that kind of light or enforce behavior that shines that kind of transparency sort of scorecard, if you will, country to country, because they risk, folks not participating anymore, not showing up. And so a lot of the tools and a lot of the movement behind more and more companies voluntarily disclosing and more companies having publicity around being a leader or a poor performer, that is really driving a lot of this momentum in the corporate climate space in ways that just simply haven't happened in international climate diplomacy because of some of those complex relationships. And I really didn't appreciate that myself personally until sort of hearing a lot of that feedback in Madrid recently.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. It's definitely something that probably a lot of people don't realize. I think it's just one of those decisions too, where it's like a lot of this comes down to budget and what we were talking about, and even building out a sustainability team, figuring out what that looks like, and businesses having to make the priority of like what do we want to focus on? How do we want to do this? How do we get the results? Like, do we need to, build all those things? I mean, it's a fascinating time. I mean, with a lot of the like lead certifications and things like that, was you just kind of have to like pay a little bit more to make sure that things are done the right way. But, I think that, a lot of the leaders that are at the forefront are like, there's no other way. It's not like you're paying more for something. That is the minimum standard and you need to meet it. You know what I mean? And that's kind of an interesting kind of like social dialogue on how to treat the problem.
That's right. Yeah, the goalposts keep moving in the right direction, and it really is largely driven by sort of peer pressure. Whether it's like you say the ever expanding green building kinds of categories and getting higher and higher levels of certification, or whether it's, the need to come out with an ambitious 2050, 2040, 2030 kind of climate goal, even when your company may not have done the math yet on what it would mean or what it would take to get there. There's clearly this kind of pressure companies are feeling, driven by investors, driven by consumer expectations, driven by employees. And that's fantastic. But at the end of the day, the work of reaching these goals, of putting companies on this course, sort of starts with data, trusted data. And that's why we're having such interesting conversations across every industry with our customers now, because you sort of can't begin if you don't know where you are. And if you sort of know where you are, but it's very inefficiently done or not particularly high quality, now is a good time to shore up that data set as, there's greater and greater visibility to launch some of these key strategic objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk to guests all the time that are working at like the cutting edge of big data and machine learning and things. And it's like, it's a travesty to not be collecting the data that we need to, because we're going to be able to leverage it for impact, right? And like, that's part of the problem. It's like, if you're not even capturing it in the cloud, if it's sitting on other people's, whatever, somewhere sneaking around in the back of their computer, like, that's not helpful. And it brings me to something that I want to talk to you both about is, this 1 trillion trees initiative. Obviously we want to, for all of our listeners, check out we'll link it up in the show notes, check out the 1 trillion trees initiative. But this is like a perfect example of how you can leverage data, right? If we were just going to say, hey, we're going to, create this initiative to plant 1 trillion trees, like, that's awesome. But without the data side of this, it's like, we don't, if we're not able to track and understand it, then it's like, how do you get more and more and more initiatives like that off the ground? And like, that's part of the thing. You have to show, the proof and the business case and the case of all these things. And we can, but we just have to capture the data.
Yeah, thanks so much for pointing out the importance of 1 trillion trees, 1t.org, an effort by the global community to help all of us reach an incredibly important objective of trying to plant and protect and conserve as many trees as possible. This is based on some really interesting research about the number of trees that once existed here on planet Earth and the number of trees that there are today, and the amount of space there is with the current spread of the population, and what could be protected and what could be planted. And there's a really active and interesting scientific debate about these questions in terms of the exact right number and exactly where. But the notion of we can all focus on this regardless of our political persuasion, regardless of our industry, regardless of the country in which we live, a truly bipartisan and global effort, which is one part of this larger whole, that just like companies are counting their carbon emissions, that here on the other side of the ledger of carbon sequestration is this incredible piece of technology, the tree, that has always been around, and that really does incredible work to offset our carbon emissions. They take time. They don't happen in year one of planting, so they need to be protected. They need to be nurtured. They need to be arranged as projects by people who know how to do this. But this 1t.org initiative is really trying to help all of that improve capacity and quality and breadth across the world, with government commitments, company commitments. We ourselves at Salesforce made a 100 million tree commitment. Many countries, many thousands of companies have stepped up and similarly made commitments in the months since it was launched at Davos. And so thanks for bringing attention to it. That's 1t.org.
So Sue, I'm curious, as I kind of mentioned earlier, you are the, number one user of the product and also, number one product tester. So you're both, customer and product side of this, truly building something that for yourself, which is always a good thing. I'm curious, like, what does this mean for Sustainability Cloud? Like, how do you go about iterating and developing, this with all of the information and the knowledge that you've kind of built in your career to have something impactful for your peers?
Yeah, and thanks for asking. I think I always feel really lucky to be both customer number one and developer number one and tester number one. because that gives me the privilege to like see both sides, right? And I see what a typical user needs to empower sustainability programs, and how different technologies could help address those issues in our programs. So I feel really lucky to have the room to explore and build quick prototypes and test out in my real world programs and confirm the value of technology and identify the ways to improve. In the meantime, I think running those sustainability programs like reporting and setting meaningful targets for companies and stakeholder engagement, etc. So those programs also allow me to actively think about some process deficiencies and what are the common data issues or information gaps. So I can also be inspired constantly by managing those cutting edge programs. Really feel privileged and lucky to have those room in Salesforce to connect to those product experts and engineers and brainstorm and wisdom and get inspired about those ideas, and so that we can make Sustainability Cloud applicable and valuable for broader customers and everyone in our ecosystem.
I'm sure you do a fair amount of customer discovery with meeting people at conferences and talking to your peers. I'm curious, is there anything has surprised you in terms of some of the feedback that you've gotten from peers?
Yeah, I think most of the feedback I got either it's what's being really valuable for them or what are some constant changes. I think they're pretty aligned on, I guess, what I observed in Salesforce own programs. Yeah, I guess one thing I observed is that some of them actually, like I mentioned before, some of them actually, after they use some of other technologies or other existing solutions in the market, they chose to switch back to Excel spreadsheets. And that actually the piece that really surprised me, because as a first user of this solution or similar solution, I do see huge values to not only maintain some structured data set and drive actionable insights using this data, but also to use technology and keep improving our programs. Right? So that's a piece that really surprised me, and I think there are some valuable work that are needed for Salesforce and technology companies to identify the good approach to help drive adoptions of use those technology in those business use cases and more and more environmental programs.
So obviously with the coronavirus and the pandemic right now, obviously super difficult to deal with in a lot of ways. I'm just curious, like, how are both of you looking at, leading during tough times and some, strategies that you're using to help connect with employees, help to connect with customers, and kind of, facilitate some of the, huge changes that are going on?
Yeah, that's a really important question. First, I'll say as a Salesforce employee, I feel incredibly grateful to work at Salesforce during this crisis. The consistent messaging and modeling from our CEO and our entire C-suite down of taking care of ourselves, of taking care of our families, of flexibility, which I'm very grateful for, having a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old here in a 2-bedroom apartment when my wife and I are both working full time. The kind of allowances, flexibility, and support have been incredible, and we've sensed that across the company. It's been quite a bonding time with our customer conversations because we're all going through this together. We're often getting on calls and talking about really serious things together, how we're feeling, how our families are doing, how we might be feeling afraid. And the link to talking about sustainability and Sustainability Cloud, even for those interested in discussing it in these particular weeks, is really a conversation about preparedness, about crisis, about what it looks like, what the stark differences are when people do and don't plan ahead in various ways, And, unfortunately, the reality in which we're all living is giving us practice in something that we, knew would come one day, didn't know exactly how or when. Many of us who think about sustainability day in and day out. And I think it's helping us all forge bonds and develop some resilience that we'll use going forward, including in how we think about, the unfolding changes and uncertainty around climate change that are just as scientifically certainly ahead.
Yeah, totally agree. I think some tactics or strategies I have been using, for example, is definitely be aware of and be cautious, of current situation when I talk to multiple stakeholders across the companies, because everyone has tough challenges to deal with at this moment, right? Whether personally or professionally. So in a lot of programs that I have seen and I'm managing, definitely just be cautious on these issues and always be grateful and when I talk to our stakeholders, we always talk about our personal lives and what are the things that's going on in the world and things like that. So definitely just being cautious, and those issues are super helpful. And definitely, I think because of the quarantine and the coronavirus, we have seen a lot of transportations shut down and, not a lot of people going outside and going to office. So we're trying to bring up some silver lining and good side of this, because a lot of emissions are reduced and because of those reduced activities. And so we're trying to think about how could we inspire others to discover those silver linings as well.
All right, let's get into our lightning round. These questions are fast and easy. Just like the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, I don't need to tell you both because you know all about the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. You can go to salesforce.com/platform to learn more. They're great. We love them. They've been sponsoring this show from the first episode. Check them out. Lightning round questions. Ari and Sue, are you ready?
Ready.
#1. Sue, we'll start with you. What app on your phone is the most fun?
Well, I would say Einstein Analytics because I have a lot of
That's cheating.
Environmental dashboards.
I appreciate it, but that is cheating. Ari, what about you?
That'll definitely be Khan Academy Kids. It has my 2-year-old riveted. The music continues to be catchy, and it's amazing to have online learning on any kind of device for preschool age kids.
How about favorite podcast or book that you've listened to or read recently?
I'm a lover of The Daily, the New York Times podcast. It's been incredible, since its inception last year, and I'm always grateful when I get to hear a full episode on the way to or from work. I miss those commutes.
I would vote for Economist. It definitely helps me when I was in commute, and definitely helped me catch up on those important news related to climate change and the economy as well.
Favorite thing to cook or eat?
Who doesn't love a great pizza? We're having about 10 a week, it seems, right now.
Oh, me too. I'm with you.
I would say tacos.
Ooh.
Mexican tacos. Yep.
See, this always just makes me hungry. I don't know why I asked these. Final question. What advice would you have for someone in technology that is looking to get their hands around their sustainability kind of ecosystem and footprint?
There are going to be incredible opportunities all over the world to develop expertise around sustainability in companies. There are thousands of people that have those jobs now. There are going to be tens or hundreds of thousands of people in the very near future. So if you're interested in bringing together sustainability and technology, it's going to be an incredible ride. We are one of many companies that are very eager to partner with you, work with you to develop the skills that'll help you in those jobs from day one. We have something called Trailhead, where there are learning opportunities around sustainability and soon around Sustainability Cloud in particular. And there are many other places as well for great training. It's going to be an incredible career opportunity for you if you want to bring together sustainability and technology.
Definitely. And you don't have to be sustainability professionals. And, to combat climate change, we need all types of people with all types of expertise. So it's never too late for anyone to join.
Awesome. That's it. That's all we got. Thank you both for coming on and sharing everything. We'll be following along to Sustainability Cloud and all of the amazing work. Everybody check out 1 Trillion Trees, which again is just really, really cool. And an awesome initiative. We need more trees. It's not exactly the hottest take in the world. It's just pretty obvious. So everybody should check that out. Sorry, what is it? TrillionTrees.org or is it
1t.org?
Yeah, that is 1t.org. So check that out, and we'll see everybody or talk to you real soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
IT Visionaries is brought to you by the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Take climate action with a pre-built carbon accounting solution and gain insights into your greenhouse gas emissions. Learn more at salesforce.com/solutions/sustainability.